So joining us to talk more about Trump's tax plan and the latest poll numbers is Republican political analyst Kevin Eckery, who just got back from Washington, D.C., and Democratic political analyst Robin Swanson. Thanks for being here, as always, you guys. Let's just start right now with the numbers. The NBC Wall Street Journal poll, here they are for the Republicans. Trump leads now at 21%. He's followed by Ben Carson with 20%, Marco Rubio, Carly Fiorina tied for third with 11%, and then you see Jeb Bush there with 7% support. So what do you make of these numbers, Kevin?
Well, a lot of it at this stage is still a beauty contest, but I think that one of the things that is definitely striking about the numbers is how poorly Jeb Bush continues to do. He really needs to gain some traction, get a break here, because he just does not seem to know how to handle the Donald Trump issue. Well, on the other hand, though, Marco Rubio has done really well, and I think that he is definitely moving up, and I think at this point he risks, or rather Bush risks, being eclipsed by Rubio.
I think I would agree that Jeb Bush is totally off the radar, and despite his fundraising advantage, I mean, he has millions and millions of dollars more than all of the rest of the pack, and that's a big problem for Republicans as they look at their field, because Carly Fiorina is breaking through, but her debate performance is very different than her one-on-one performances with interviewers. So I think the Republican Party it's been called a civil war.
And Robin, we'll get to the numbers for the Democrats in a moment, but we do want to talk about the tax plan that was just rolled out today by Donald Trump. As was just mentioned in that report, he's been criticized for being all show, no substance. How do you think these specifics, this tax plan, will help or hurt his campaign? Robin, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, he's saying that it's a tax cut for the wealthy, a tax cut for the poor, and you know who it isn't a tax cut for is the middle class. So I think he's missing a big population of voters that's not going to resonate with people, and as usual, I think it's an empty suit proposal.
You know, Kevin, let's talk about where he is in the polls. He's still in the front, but he's kind of plateaued at this point.
Yeah, he's plateaued some, but but by that same token, I mean, rolling out things like this tax plan and sort of continuing to be in the lead when everybody thought he would have just been a summer fling is important. I think that, regardless of the details, the fact that the headline that comes out of the tax plan is that 50% of Americans will no longer pay income tax is a very, credible and attention-getting, kind of idea.
But it doesn't say where that money is coming from.
It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
You make a good point.
A proposal that doesn't say where the money is coming from, I think, is an empty suit proposal. But the fact that he is speaking a language that conservative voters are hearing, I think should be really troubling to the Republican Party nationally and here, because I think it doesn't appeal to moderate voters, centrist voters, at the end of the day, general election voters.
Yeah, but remember, voters aren't going to read and don't really care at this point about the details of a major wonky policy plan. They want to hear something that gives them, a line, an idea that they can hang on to, and 50% of the public not paying taxes is something that they can hang on to.
Something specific, anyway. Let's switch to the Democrats real quick here, because those numbers are different too. The latest NBC Wall Street Journal poll showing us tonight that Hillary Clinton is in the lead with 42% right now. Bernie Sanders now up to 35%. And look at this, Joe Biden, who isn't even running at this point, has 17% support. He could run. Hillary now facing a hearing on Benghazi. So is Hillary Clinton's campaign in trouble, Robin?
No, I think she's absolutely still holding her lead. Bernie Sanders is a compelling candidate. He speaks to a swath of voters that, he resonates with, and I think that's a significant part of the Democratic Party. At the end of the day, when we choose a candidate, everyone will coalesce behind them. And I think the Joe Biden thing is interesting. He's really compelling. He obviously, as vice president, has a great story to tell, and he has some tragedy in his family that's really compelling as well. So I think he's just an empathetic, sympathetic character, but he hasn't said he's going to run, and I don't know that he will.
Yeah, but Kevin, I mean, that Clinton now has to face a couple challenges here coming up. The emails just will not go away.
Yeah, the emails aren't going to go away for a long time because not only is there a hearing coming up very shortly, but every month more emails are released, and that's the agreement that the Clintons made with the court. So that's a built-in news factor that's going to continue to plague her into the coming year. You also have the situation where in that same poll you were showing that Senator Clinton isn't doing well in head-to-head matches. She was not doing nearly as well, for example, as Joe Biden in head-to-head matches with the Republicans. So, you know, we still need to see what the vice president's going to do. We still need to see, you know, what Senator Clinton's going to do. But it's not over till it's over.
Robin, Kevin, thanks as always for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay.